Happy 50th anniversary, A10. Why aren't you getting more teams in the NCAA tournament?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Friday, and welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your co-hosts. I'm Andy Patton. He is Isaac Schade, and you are joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. I want to thank all of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day, and remind you all that you can check out this show ad-free by listening on Amazon Music. Today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. There's more to every player. There's more dedication, more attention to detail. There's more to a Mazda vehicle as well. Stay tuned later in the episode for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward segment on Mazda. Move and be moved. Well, Isaac, we are continuing our conference preview series. We've been doing team previews as well. I think we've done now 13 of those team previews. We got Washington and Texas Tech knocked out this week, but we're also every Friday from now until the start of the college basketball season. Isaac and I will be previewing a different conference. We're talking about all the power conferences, as well as a few of the more premier mid-major conferences in college basketball. We talked about the SEC last week, and today we are talking about the Atlantic 10 Conference. We're going to talk about their history, especially the 50-year anniversary of the A10 this year. So we'll talk a little bit about that, their recent lack of success in terms of the NCAA tournament. We're also going to talk about our predictions for the 5-man all A10 team. We're going to talk tiers ranking this conference. We're also going to give our predictions for how many teams from this conference will make the NCAA tournament, who we think is going to win it all that stuff coming up. Jam-packed episode for you here, talking A10 hoops. And Isaac, I think the big storyline for the A10, not only that it is the 50th anniversary, as we alluded to, but it's also coming at a time where this conference has not been as dominant as it has been in previous eras. And I know you did a great job laying this out and kind of looking at how many teams the conference has historically been getting in the big dance and how that has taken a downturn in the last half decade or so.
Yeah, Andy, I went back and looked at how the Atlantic 10 has done in the modern era of the NCAA tournament. So it's not the entirety of those 5 decades of the A10, but it is 4 of the last 5 because the modern era started. There have been 40 tournaments since 1985. Andy, wow, the A10
that feels really old.
Well, guess what? We are really. It's funny for me because I was born in 1984, so I'm like I'm 1 year older than the modern NCAA tournament, so it's always easy to remember where we're at. But then you got to subtract 1 because of freaking COVID. Whatever. Anyway, Andy, the A10 historically has been great. In 34 of those 40 tournaments, they have sent multiple bids. There were 2 really strong stretches from 91 to 2001. Those 11 seasons, they had at least 3 teams make the tournament every season except 95, and they still had 2 in that one. Another big stretch from 08 to 2018. Those 11 seasons, they had at least 3 teams literally every season, including 2014 when they got 6, the most ever bids for the A10. That's great, Andy. But here's what's interesting and kind of like, are we at a crossroads? There have been 6 single bid seasons. 2 of those have been in the last 3 years. Andy, since 2018, they have not had 3 or more at all. Every season from 2019 forward, obviously take out COVID year, but that means they're on a 6-season streak of having 2 or fewer teams in the NCAA tournament. The longest streak of such they had prior to that was 4. And we'll get into this more obviously as we make our picks, but we're careening for a 7th straight season of the A10 having 2 or fewer teams in the NCAA tournament. So Andy, here's my question for us. Is it going to be cyclical and eventually the A10 is going to have a glow up and bounce back? Or is this the new normal for the A10, and they're just going to kind of hover in that like 8th to 15th best conference?
You know, it's funny. I think you can make an argument for either way here. I think the conventional kind of take on this is going to be that it's not going to be secular, and that this is a continuing problem for the A10 as power conferences continue to get more bloated and bigger, and money is now permeating the sport in a way that's more upfront than it's ever been. And we know that these big power conference schools have millions and millions of dollars that they're spending on their programs. And we know that these A10 schools do not. They don't have that kind of money. They're not supplemented by football. And so I think that and in the era of transfer portal and in the era of NIL like that, those things matter so much more than, these programs' history and things like that. And I think coaches, have always left the A10 for bigger jobs. It's not, Shaka Smart, obviously, and Jim Larinaga, they both left, those jobs even before the NIL and the transfer portal era. But I think it'll be even more different. We've seen coaches leave head coaching jobs at mid-major schools for assistant coaching jobs in the power conference. I don't think you're going to leave an A10 job for an assistant job necessarily. No. Could we eventually get there? Maybe. I think that that's possible. So I do think that there's some real concern about how long this conference will be viable and if we will see them kind of return to being great. Having said all of that, and I don't think we're going to get a ton into this later, but VCU, in their first year with a new coach, Phil Martinelli, they have recruited more top 75, top 60 recruits out of high school than they ever have before, because high school players are choosing to go to programs like this because they are not getting those opportunities. Power conference programs would rather go get a dude who averaged 16 points a game at a mid-major school than a high schooler outside the top 30. And so a lot of those high school players are choosing to go to places like VCU or Dayton or, other really strong mid-major programs.
Right.
Can you get 3 teams from the A10 in the NCAA tournament based on freshmen? I don't know. I don't want to say yes to that necessarily, but I think that there is the opportunity for these programs to kind of ying while everybody else yangs and kind of find a different way to potentially build some strong programs. So I don't think the dream is dead, but I do think that it's a concerning spot for the A10 right now.
I think I would have gone with zig while everyone else zags, but fine,
makes
whatever.
More sense. But yeah, fine.
But no, legitimately, I think the path to success here is we got to moneyball this thing, Andy. Right? Mm-hmm. Like you said, go get the high school recruits that the high majors aren't looking at anymore, and also get those guys that thought they were high major material that are really mid major material that are bouncing down as some of the mid majors are bouncing up. Those 2 avenues for me is where you got to go if you're an A10 program, and that's the way you get it back, right? You just got to find your way in, and I think they can. But obviously, in this era of the house settlement and that making football all the more important, and you got a team like UMass out to the MAC, that's going to have a big impact on this as well. So we're watching all that stuff. Andy, the big news that happened literally this week as we start thinking of the new coaches here is that St. Joe's is getting a brand new coach fewer than 2 months ahead of the start of the season. And I guess it's not unique in this era. We saw Tony Bennett do this even later last offseason. But man, what's going on with St. Joe's, Andy?
Yeah, they lose their coach, Billy Lang. He takes the job, an assistant job with the New York Knicks, just like you said, 2 months before the start of the season. Billy Lang was going to be on the hot seat. He was already on the hot seat. A lot of people kind of thought, hey, unless this team made the tournament this year, he was probably going to lose his job in March. So maybe he was just kind of preempting that decision by taking this job ahead of time. But again, I think part of this here, and again, it could be part of a longer conversation, but coaches are being very intentional on their timing because they're trying to protect their rosters. And it's not their roster anymore, obviously, but Tony Bennett was pretty intentional about when he retired with the hopes that Ron Sanchez will be able to keep his roster together and have enough success at Virginia that he would keep that job. I don't know why he thought that would happen. Ron Sanchez did not have a strong history as a head coach, and it did not work very well for them at all. And of course, they hired Brian Odom from VCU, which we'll talk about. But St. Joe's kind of a similar situation here. I don't think we're going to see as we're recording this right now at 27, 28 days of a transfer portal window for these players if they do want to hit the portal. But unless any of them are feeling confident that they're going to redshirt, I don't think anybody's going to do that. So these guys are just left stuck with the program without the coach that they plan to play for. Now, Steve Donahue was elevated from associate head coach to head coach and was given a promise. He's not an interim. He is the new head coach. And I think that that's a strong move by St. Joe's to kind of try to keep the peace and keep everybody together. But this is a really tough scene for a St. Joe's program that has been a little struggling lately. They had a phenomenal player in the last 3 years, and Rasheer Fleming went from a 0-star guy to a first-round pick. The development in that system was great, but they hadn't made the NCAA tournament in Billy Lang's 6-year tenure. And so I don't think this changes a lot for them going forward, but it is part of a pattern we have seen with these coaching changes happening pretty close to the start of the season.
And that's the difference is you get Steve Donahue, who's been a head coach at the D1 level, unlike at Virginia last year. And that's good. What's funny, Andy, is we think about the other coaching changes in this league. The last, I when I think St. Joe's, who do I think of? Phil Martelli, right? And it's funny that one of the other coaching changes is his son heading to VCU to replace Ryan Odom. Phil Martelli Jr. comes over from Bryant. Great stuff there at LaSalle. Fran Dunphy has retired. Darius Nichols comes over from Radford. Darius Nichols, who we've had on the show before, in was he our first head coaching interview ever?
I think he might have been, right before 2 seasons ago, I think.
Yeah, so shouts to Darius Nichols. What a guy. And then at Fordham, Keith Ergo is out, unfortunately got fired, and Mike Magpayo comes over from UC Riverside there. And so those are the 4 new coaching changes, Andy, as this league drops from 15 with UMass out the door down to 14.
Yep, a lot of great stuff in this conference. I think the other storyline is we enter year 2 here for St. Bonaventure under their new general manager, Adrian Wojnarowski. He obviously does not have coaching power or anything like that, but it'll be interesting to see how this St. Bonaventure team does in the second year with Woj kind of, handling some of the duties of trying to, recruit and get some money for that program and things like that. They also recently decided to do a pro day, which is interesting. We've never seen a mid-major program host a pro day before. So I'm interested to see if that ends up kind of adding some more intrigue or interest to St. Bonaventure's program going forward. Last year, this conference was 8th out of 31 at Ken Pom. The regular season champs were George Mason and VCU tied at the top. Of course, the tournament champ was VCU. They made the postseason as an 11 seed, lost to BYU in the first round. No other teams from this conference in the NCAA tournament, although they did have a bunch of teams in the NIT, Loyola, Dayton, George Mason, the Bonnies, St. Joe's, and St. Louis. And Isaac, I think that's the question. How many teams in this tournament, or how many teams in this conference are going to be in the tournament? And I know we're going to get to that a little later in the show, but that's the big storyline with this conference. Can they be more than a 1-bid league going forward?
And you see those, that's 6 teams just right there below the surface that just got to take one more step forward. And obviously all of that math changes if we add a whole kit and caboodle of teams next offseason. Andy, Robbie Avila, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is back for St. Louis. Is he going to be A10 Player of the Year? We are going to make our all-conference predictions along with our Player of the Year, Coach of the Year, Transfer of the Year, Freshman of the Year, all of those predictions coming up here in just a second. Right after I tell you about Mazda. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep the game moving. This week's moment that moved the game forward is Illinois, the 11th ranked team in the nation, heading down to Durham, North Carolina, beating up on Duke 45-19. The reason we want to put it here in our moving the game forward is because last year on the basketball court in MSG, the world's most famous arena, Duke destroyed Illinois 110-67. And so really cool for Illinois to get some payback down on the gridiron now. Pretty cool stuff. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's always more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Andy, time to get into our preseason all-conference predictions as well as our preseason awards predictions. Last year in the A10, the A10 does 3 teams and 6 on each. Come on, what are we doing? Just cut one off of each. We'll always go to that well. But Andy, I say that because of those 18 players that made a team last year, only 2 of them, just 2, returned, including Robbie Avila, who we've already mentioned was on the second team, and Rafael Castro from George Washington. Andy, why don't you unveil for us if those 2 guys are on your list and who else joins them if so?
I will also say very briefly, if you wanted another reason why these conferences struggling to get 2 or more teams in the big dance, that's probably a pretty compelling one. 16 of the 18 players on those first 3 teams no longer in the picture for the A10. I didn't pull the data on how many of them were transfers, but I know quite a few of them did transfer to different programs. Regardless, I won't tease it anymore. Yes, both of those players are on my top 5 A10 list here. Robbie Avila from St. Louis averaged 17-7 last year. Had some injury stuff early in the year, but I think he's a guy that's going to be a massive player in this league in his second year with this team, third year under coach Josh Schertz. Rafael Castro was great last year for George Washington, averaged 14-9. I see no reason why he won't be back in that conversation again this year, especially if George Washington is a top 2 or 3 team in this league. After that, I also have Tyrell Ward, a transfer from LSU to VCU. He averaged about 9 points last year for LSU, but again, 9 points in the SEC is pretty compelling for what he's able to do. I believe Bart Torvik has him projected to average like over 17 points a game this year for the Rams. We'll see if he can quite reach that threshold, but I think he's going to be one of the best players in this league. I also have another transfer, Keontae Jones, who is transferred to Dayton. Keontae Jones is from CSUN, Cal State Northridge, was incredibly productive there, 13 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 assists. He's just like a 6'6" bowling ball of a dude, really, really good athlete, really, really strong physical guy. He actually committed to USC in the transfer portal and then decommitted from USC and ended up at Dayton. I think he's going to be a great, great player this year. And then Miles Corey at Rhode Island. Tough to get somebody from Rhode Island, especially if they finish where we're projecting them to finish in the conference, but Corey was great last year at South Alabama, averaged about 14 points, 4.3 assists. If he puts up similar numbers to that and Rhode Island climbs even into the top 10 in this conference, I think he could be in that conversation.
Shouts to Lamar Odom. You know, Andy, come on with it. Like, where is he the most famous Ram of all time?
I would imagine so, yes.
Yeah, I don't see how there's anybody else. Okay, Andy, for my take, which, by the way, if you're new to our conference previews, you never had heard one before or watched one before, one of the things we try to do, or not try to do, we hold ourselves to, is we don't double up with 2 players from any team. Andy did that wonderfully, no doubling up, and I have done the same. 3 of my players are the exact same as Andy. The guys that were both on the team last year, Robbie Avila at St. Louis and Rafael Castro. And then I also had Tyrell Ward at VCU. I think he's going to be great there coming over from Baton Rouge. What does that mean? Do you know French? What does Baton Rouge mean?
I have no idea. I didn't know what you said with your accent there, but I don't know what it means.
I mean, I'm going to Paris next summer, Andy. So I've been
figure that out.
You know what? My wife's been working on Duolingo with French.
There you go.
I'm sticking to Spanish because it's comfortable for me. Okay, Andy, my 2 divergences from you is I have a different Dayton Flyer. It's a returning Dayton Flyer. So I'm kind of taking the safer road, although I'm with you. I think Keontae Jones is going to be great. But I'm going to go with Javon Bennett, who is a returner to Dayton, was their 3rd leading scorer, highest returning leading scorer, 11.6 last year. Shot 39% from beyond the arc on 5.4 attempts a game. He's a little buddy, 5'11". But, man, I think Dayton is going to get – I think last year was a blip. I think they will be better. And I think both Keontae Jones, who you mentioned, and Javon Bennett, who I have, will be critical in making that happen. And then my 5th addition is similar to what you said about Rhode Island. This is from a team that I do not think is going to do a ton in the A10, but it's John Hughley IV, who has spent – this is, Andy, his 6th year in college. He has spent the previous 5 all at the 3 at Pitt, 1 at Oklahoma, 1 at Xavier. He's only really got 1 year that was really dynamic. That was his sophomore year at Pitt. 14-8 a game, 7.9 boards. He can shoot, career 32.7%. Also, he's 6'11 and 270. That game and that body should excel, especially at the A10 level. We just haven't seen it outside of that sophomore year at that level. I think he comes to Duquesne, where Bronny should have been, and he balls out, and I think it's going to be incredible. I know how to say Duquesne, folks. I'm just having fun, so don't roast me, all you Duquesne Dukes out there. All right, Andy.
Me laughing gave away that you do know how to pronounce Duquesne, but I wish I hadn't, and then people would be like, "What on earth is he saying?"
We need to have some bits like that. You know how like I don't know. It's just fun.
That's a dangerous bit. We're gonna lose people.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. All right, Andy, let's go on to our preseason award predictions. Player of the year, you've given us your 5 on your first team all-conference. Which one of those are you pulling for player of the year?
I'm going Avila. I mean, I think it's the safe pick, but it's the safe pick for a reason. I mean, he was incredibly productive last year. We've already seen him in the A10. We've already seen him put up elite numbers in the A10. Now he's back again for a team that's, more structured around him. It's a coach he's familiar with. I think there are other really talented players in this league, but of the other returners in this league, I don't think anybody's going to put up the kind of numbers that Avila is. And I think that makes him the safest, not exactly the most fun pick, but the safest pick for player of the year.
I mean, I think it's a fun pick because he's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar,
yes,
man.
That's
so fun. And remember, guys, last year he went into his first year at St. Louis banged up a little bit. Hopefully a healthy offseason leads him and Josh Schertz and the Billikens. Shouts to my guy Micah Ballou, by the way, who has season tickets to St. Louis. Man, go Billikens. Love a good elephant mascot. That's good stuff. Andy, I too have Robbie Avila as my player of the year. Transfer of the year. He was on my first team all conference. I'm going with John Hoogley. It's kind of a sleeper pick, but man, if he can be who he is, I just think there's massive, quite literally massive opportunity for him at Duquesne. Andy, who's your transfer of the year?
I'm going with Tyrell Ward. I was really close to picking Tyrell Ward for player of the year. I just feel like a transfer would have to put up, like if Avila and Ward are similar productivity wise, unless VCU's VCU will probably finish first, but St. Louis would have to finish like outside the top 5 for it to go to Ward over him. So I think I'm leaning Avila for player of the year, but Ward to me is the best transfer in this conference. I'll give an honorable mention to my other all-conference pick, which is Keontae Jones here. There's a lot of great transfers in this conference, but I think Ward's going to be the most productive out of that group.
All right, Andy, one of the more obvious picks we will make all offseason long is the freshman of the year here in the A10. There's an obvious choice for this, and I don't even think there's anyone else you could consider giving that award to unless you think I'm crazy.
I do not think you're crazy. And we alluded to this earlier. VCU's recruiting high schoolers better than they ever have before. And Nick Lewis is a borderline top 50 freshman in this class. He's 56th in 247's updated rankings, 6'1" point guard, going to play a big role right away for this team. I'm sure there's other freshmen that are unranked that are going to play big roles for some of these, not as projected to be as good schools like LaSalle and Rhode Island and teams like that. But in terms of freshmen who are going to be productive at good teams in this conference, it's Nick Lewis, and it's honestly not that close.
Yeah, that's the way to put it, Andy. It's the combination in my mind of 3 things: successful team, productive player, but high skilled player, right? Like a lot of times just because of opportunity, we might see a lesser skill player blow up. So I'm right with you. Coach of the year. Let's wrap this bad boy up. Andy, I'm going, we'll get to our conference picks in a little bit, but wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I'm going with Phil Martelli Jr. If VCU wins the conference championship in year 1 for him, I don't see how you can give it to anyone else. Even the bottom dweller who wins 3 more games than he was supposed to, I don't think you can mess that one up. Now, I also think if St. Louis can do it, if Robbie Avila wills this team to winning the conference, the same for me would be true of Josh Schertz in year 2, would give it to him as well. Andy, who are you going with?
I'm going with the type of coach that you hate who wins this award every once in a while.
I not hate this coach. I hate when that award is given out that way.
And it's not exactly the same situation. It's Chris Caputo at George Washington. They're projected by many places to finish 2 or 2nd or 3rd in this conference. If they do that, if they finish top 4, top 3, they were 7th last year. They had 21 wins, so they were good last year, but they finished 7th, just 9-9 in conference play. If they bump up to finishing top 3, I think that he would get the award. Again, whether he would deserve it over Martelli, I don't know in that situation, but I do think that he's a very strong candidate to win this award just by improving a little bit on what they did last year. Well, Isaac, let's continue this conversation because we've been talking about it and alluding to it and teasing it so much throughout the show, but is the A10 going to be a multi-bid league this upcoming season? If so, how many teams are going to get in? If not, who is going to be the team that represents this conference in the NCAA tournament? We're going to answer all of that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, it's almost the weekend, and it's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For South Florida, QB Byron Brown delivered in a big way in the Bulls' massive upset over 13th-ranked Florida. This came a week after they throttled the 25th-ranked Broncos of Boise State. When the pressure was on, Brown came through. No hesitations, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week week. This is not a fluke. Like we said, Byron Brown, he is on a streak. Can he keep it going this weekend with a third straight top 25 upset? This time they're taking on Miami. Just like Brown delivered for the Bulls, DoorDash delivers on your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order. Stack it all up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. All right, Isaac, continuing our conversation here about the Atlantic 10 Conference as part of our conference preview, the second one here. We did the SEC last week, talking A10 this week, and I'm going to rattle off my tiers. I have 5 different tiers that I grouped all of the teams in this conference into. We'll have Isaac react to that, and then we'll give you our predictions, who's going to win, how it's going to shake out this year. Tier number 1 for me was 3 teams, VCU at the top. Probably not a surprise if you've been listening to the rest of the show. We got St. Louis at number 2 and then George Washington at number 3. That is tier number 1. Tier 2 also has 3 teams, Dayton, Loyola Chicago. We haven't talked much about them yet on the show. And then George Mason as well. Tier 3 is where we get the fighting Adrian Wojnarowski's, St. Bonaventure Bonnies, as well as Duquesne and St. Joe's. Tough team to kind of figure out where to put following their coaching change. And then tier 4, we have Davidson, Richmond, and Fordham. And then tier 5 is Rhode Island, followed by LaSalle. Isaac, what were your thoughts on the tiers here for the A10?
One of the things I would do, I said it in the last segment, Andy, I think Dayton is going to have a bit of a bounce back. They've been so consistent. I think last year they just kind of fell victim to transfer portal college basketball era, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't think that happens 2 years in a row. I think Dayton, I would shove them up into that top tier, which maybe that makes it too bloated. And then you put VCU in like 1A and those other 3 in 1B or something like that. But I would probably, I think Dayton's going to be better than Loyola Chicago and George Mason by enough that I would separate them from that tier personally.
Yeah. I think I thought about, instead of putting Dayton in tier 1, I actually thought about having tier 2 just be Dayton, which I think could also work too. But you're right. Dayton's probably a little closer to George Washington and St. Louis than it is to Loyola Chicago and George Mason.
Yeah, for sure. The next is at some point, I think the Bonaventure thing is going to go. I'm not ready. I think they're in 3 or 4 somewhere. Mm-hmm. I think I would have put them closer to 4 than 3, mm-hmm. but I also know we're not necessarily arranging things in mm-hmm. tier order. It's just within the tier. Mm-hmm. I am, as you said, one of the things that I thought as you talked through this, I'm mm-hmm. very curious to see how St. Joe's reacts. But again, mm-hmm. they bring up somebody who's within the program and who has head coaching experience already. And mm-hmm. so I think that allows them to be essentially what they were already going to be. The other thing, and this is just petty at the back end of it, I'd move Rhode Island up to tier 4 and leave LaSalle all by themselves in tier 5. And poor LaSalle, man, it is what it is for this year, but we'll deal with that. Andy, and so there that is. One of the things that's interesting to me, you mentioned kind of you feeling similarly about Dayton. You and I know are kind of both in on VCU, as we've been alluding to, but we noticed that Blue Ribbon actually picked St. Louis to win over VCU. Do you think that's something that the Fighting Shirtses can do here in year 2 or no?
I do. I think we've seen coaches in their first year in the A10, especially if they were coming from a smaller conference, which the Missouri Valley is still a very, very strong conference. But we've seen coaches that sometimes struggle in year 1 and then kind of turn it on or pour it on in year 2. I think Drew Valentine's a great example of that at Loyola Chicago, where his first year in the A10 was not great, and then his second year was much, much better. I would not be surprised at all if Josh Schertz in St. Louis finishes top 3, top 2. I wouldn't even be shocked if they win the conference. I am going with VCU. I think at this point we can just say that, but St. Louis is right. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if you told me that somebody other than VCU wins it. I do think I would pick St. Louis. Just because I think they're the most likely team to take them down. Whereas I think George Washington and Dayton and some of those other teams are going to be very good, but I would be surprised to see them be better than VCU.
And that's what, same as you, I have VCU for both my regular season and conference tournament champ. But that conference tournament moment is where the dominance of Avila could take over, and you see St. Louis win the conference tournament champ. So that would be the most likely different scenario to me, is St. Louis winning the conference tournament. Yeah. Andy, let's wrap this thing by look. is the Atlantic 10 going to get back to that like 3 or more teams, or are they stuck in that 1 and 2 team NCAA tournament purgatory they've been in for the last 6 tournaments?
I unfortunately think they're going to be stuck at 1. I think there is a path to them getting 2 teams in the NCAA tournament, but I think it is a slim path. And I think that it is basically effectively VCU running train on the A10 and then losing in the conference championship. Like that is the only way that I see it happening. And that would still probably require VCU to pick up some really marquee non-conference wins. Like we're talking about a VCU team with 2 losses before they lose to St. Louis or somebody in the A10 tournament. Like that's about the only way that I see it happening. And it's unfortunate because it's not even that I think there aren't 3 or 4 teams that are good enough to make the tournament from this conference. I think that there could be. I think it's, you look at some of the preseason rankings from like Bart Torvik, like they have 3 teams or 2 teams in the top 60, 3 teams in the top 70. So like it's possible that there's these teams that are good enough, but I don't think the resumes are going to come together in a way that makes sense. I don't think the committees, we saw what they wanted to do with power conference teams last year. So yeah, I think it would have to be a near perfect circumstance, but I think ultimately VCU is going to make the NCAA tournament. They're probably going to be around a 10 or 11 seed like they were last year. And I think they're going to be the only team. While just like last year, they're probably going to have 3, 4, maybe 5 teams in the NIT.
Yeah, Andy, I'm with you. I think it's just 1. And I think it is VCU. And unfortunately, I don't think VCU's resume is going to be strong enough to get them in at large. So basically, my answer is A10 tournament winner is who makes it in, right? Is the automatic bid is it. Now, one of the random things of the portal era is somebody could pop, right? Like there might be enough talent at St. Louis where they and VCU are both there in the right or whatever it is. It's just so hard to know in this day and age, but everything on paper tells me, and it tells you as well, that we're looking at a 1 bid A10 for the 3rd time in the last 4 seasons. And that is kind of crazy stuff, Andy.
Nobody would have projected that the Big West nearly had 2 NCAA tournament caliber teams last year. So like you said, you never know. But yeah, I'm with you. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be another disappointing season for the A10. Hopefully we'll see some growth going forward.
We are getting closer and closer to the tip-off of the season, less than 2 months away. Andy, Monday is 7 weeks. Is that right? Is my countdown in my head correct? That's going to be crazy. I would imagine Andy and I are going to have another team preview for you on Monday. We haven't decided whom, but it's going to be another great week of shows next week. Buckle up. Hope it's a great week of football, man. Some great games, and then we'll be back with basketball. And we are not too far away, Andy, from a whole bunch of great exhibition games. We should probably do a countdown of like the top 10 exhibition games. Yes. That'd be a fun show. Maybe I'll do that with Leaf next week because Leaf it's my Leaf week. So maybe we'll look at that. All right, you guys, if you haven't subscribed to the show, make sure you do that right now. And so you can catch all of the great action here on Locked On College Basketball. If you haven't subscribed on audio, do that as well. If you've not joined the Locked On College Basketball Discord, my goodness, why not? You're a junkie that's here in September. You should be hanging out talking with us. That link is in the show notes. As always, I want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Cheers to the Wild Pokes. Let's go McBruins, and until Monday. Peace.